On this episode of the Dairyland Initiative podcast, we're going to be talking about the great housing versus grazing debate. Hi, I'm Courtney Halbach.
And I'm Nigel Cook.
And this is the Dairyland Initiative podcast,
where we get to discuss issues related to the housing and management of dairy cattle.
Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Today, we're going to get into the great debate of housing versus grazing, and I am going to be a somewhat educated consumer because I'm going to know a little bit more about dairy cattle housing than I think the average consumer knows. And Dr. Cook is going to be, Dr. Cook.
Well, you're going to be the devil's advocate, aren't you?
I'm going to be the consumer.
Okay, well, that's good.
Who believes in naturalness of cows being outside, grazing with outdoor access.
Well, that's the topic of today, so let's get into it. The great debate.
Yeah.
Should we graze our cows?
We should. When I go to the grocery store and I see these beautiful, picturesque scenes of cows grazing, I expect dairy farmers to be doing what I see on all of the milk cartons.
No better sight.
This is beautiful. I mean, nice green grass, nice clouds in the sky. Look at how happy all those cows look.
It's the picture of naturalness, Courtney.
Yes, and I think cows should be living their best life out on pasture.
I think that's true in certain circumstances, Courtney. In the South Island of New Zealand, where I took this picture, I spent an hour just sat in the field listening to the cows munching grass. It was pretty cool.
I can imagine.
But that's not always true. There are some issues with grass growth, depending on where you are in the world, related to climate, that makes grazing a little bit more challenging.
I find that hard to believe because right now when I'm driving around, the grass is beautiful here in Wisconsin.
It's a beautiful Wisconsin spring right now, folks. But is a natural state really a better state for our cows?
Yeah.
Well, let's fast forward to late July when the grass has stopped growing and it hasn't rained for 4 weeks and it's 90 degrees.
I've blocked those days out of my mind.
You block them out?
Yeah.
There's a group of cows here desperate for a bit of shade and cooling.
Mm-hmm. Well, can't they go into that tree line in the back?
Some of them can, but sometimes there aren't any trees to shelter under. Mm-hmm. There's going to be one thirsty cow here. She's going to make a beeline for this water.
Yeah.
What happens then?
Well, aren't all the cows going to want to go up and drink? So you're going to provide them with plenty of water, right?
Yeah, here she is, and about 30 of her friends are behind her, all waiting for a drink. So actually the process of getting water out to pasture isn't as easy as you think.
Okay.
Big word for the day, Courtney. Allelomimetic.
Where'd you learn that one?
That's the word of the day, allelomimetic. Cows like to do the same thing at the same time. It's like those Far Side cartoons. You remember those?
Is that before my time?
Yeah, what are you, Gen Z?
Well,
millennial?
Yeah.
Yeah, all the old folks will know what a Larson Far Side cartoon is, where all the cows are kind of plotting against the humans driving past them. So they all do the same thing at the same time. But that's true. Cows like to graze at the same time. They like to drink at the same time. They like to lie down at the same time.
Okay. So can't they do that out at pasture?
They can when the weather's nice, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other issues we have is getting the cows to and from the pasture when we need to milk them, and maintaining this cow track so that it doesn't get all torn up and rocks underneath hurt the cow's feet. Maintaining and engineering these tracks is very challenging, and again, depending on the weather, they can really kind of break apart and cause some problems.
Well, I know it gets somewhat colder here in Wisconsin, and so should it make it easier for cows to walk?
Got this picture from our good friend Ken Nordland. It's a good reason why we do house cows in Wisconsin in the winter. You see them all just trying to shelter and stay warm, all huddled around. There are good reasons when the climate isn't conducive to grazing that we should choose to house our cows.
Yeah, but I'm going to ask the farmers, why Why? House cows.
To make lives a little easier for them and for the cows.
Okay.
So if you ask farmers why they graze, there's a number of responses. They do it when they can, when there's a favorable climate for grass growth. There's a reason certain countries have strong grazing communities. They do it when it's economically viable to do that because of their marketplace. There's this thing called the DNR in Wisconsin.
They're my friends.
Yeah, the Department of Natural Resources. They're looking after you. They're looking after the waterways. They're going to tell farmers not to graze cattle around certain areas of their farm where there's the risk of manure runoff into streams.
Well, then I'm just going to write the DNR to let the cows out on pasture.
Well, there's just certain areas you're not going to be able to do that, Courtney.
Darn.
Yeah. Farmers graze to meet certain standards. The organic standards will require a component of grazing, a proportion of their dry matter intake from grass to maintain the standards for selling and shipping organic milk.
Okay.
But, little known secret here, most countries, even where there's a grazing community, they don't graze all year round. It's very hard to do that.
What?
So a lot of European countries that graze cattle, they still house the cows half the year during the winter.
Okay.
So it doesn't let you off good housing.
Good housing? What does that look like?
Good housing, well, might look something like this. This is a freestall pen.
Do they still have that ability to roam free?
They're able to move around the walkways between the area where the stalls are. We've got free stalls here that the cows can lie in. They can roam around and access the water from a water trough.
But where are they going to get their food?
Well, that's at the feed bunk. So you see the cows lined up here. And in this situation, the farmer goes out to the fields and cuts the corn silage and the haylage, chops it all up and creates a total mixed ration, a TMR. And they'll place that ration once or twice a day. They'll put that in front of the cows, and the cows can have access to it.
But there's got to be issues when you bring cows inside. I mean,
you can do housing well, and you can do it badly.
Yeah. So
hopefully this is an example of doing it well, because this is our University of Wisconsin-Arlington facility. So cows look pretty good here. Nice, clean, comfortable cows.
Yeah,
We've got fans up here giving them some cooling for the summer, and plentiful access to great feed.
Mm-hmm.
Trouble is, when the cows are standing, they're standing on concrete, and that does pose some elevated challenges and risk for us, particularly for lameness.
Yeah, so what do you say to herds that have a low prevalence of lameness versus those higher herds?
Well, yeah, look around the world, all the studies looking at the prevalence of lameness. So this is going into a herd and trying to measure how many cows walk with a noticeable limp, which would suggest that they have pain in their foot caused by a lesion that needs to be treated. And globally, we're in a situation here where about 22% on average of the cows are walking with a noticeable limp. And that's not good.
Yeah, is that because they're all housed inside?
Well, these data represent, farms that are grazed, farms that are housed, and certainly when you look at the very lowest numbers.
Yeah, aren't those countries that primarily graze?
Some of them are. Some of them are grazing herds, and they can maintain very low numbers of lame cows. But this is actually upper Midwest right here and here. These are our cows. These are cows that are housed 24/7, and we can maintain low levels of lameness when we do housing right.
Yeah, but how do we do that? And I'm a little concerned about this 22% worldwide prevalence of lameness.
It's high. It's something that I've spent quite a long time in my career trying to work on and reduce.
Mm-hmm. So what should we be looking for when, either if it's a grazed herd or a freestall housed herd?
Yeah, so let's just, for those watching, we can see videos of cows walking here. So we define lameness in, two categories, a mild lameness and a severe lameness. So a severely lame cow is a very noticeable cow that's struggling. She's finding it hard to bear weight on a painful foot. And we really want less than 1% of the cows. We don't want any of those cows in our herds. The other cow, the mild case, is more subtle. We want fewer than 10% of the cows walking with a slight weight transfer, an arch in her back, just early indications something might be going wrong where she needs some attention from a hoof trimmer or a veterinarian to treat a cause of foot pain.
Mm-hmm.
So those are our goals. Do we achieve them? Yes, we can achieve them in grazing herds, and we can achieve them in housing herds when we do it right.
But what do cows want? I mean, you've just told me, okay, you can bring them inside. You've explained the farmer's perspective of wanting to get cows outside because of the climate. It's harder to get shade and water access to cows out on pasture. So great, all these benefits of housing, but
it's
what
a
do
good
the cows
question.
want?
It's a good question, and scientists, a number of groups around the world have done studies to ask the cow, and you can do that in a variety of different ways. This was one study done in Canada where they followed cows and they gave them a choice between a freestall barn, pretty nice, comfortable freestall barn, and pasture. And this represents the proportion of time during an average day that they spend at pasture. So what does it show? The cows like to do both.
Okay.
They like to be inside the barn during the day, so they're only at pasture 20% of the time. So they're inside when it's hot outside. They're looking for a bit of shade, but they like to go outside. The majority of cows are outside at nighttime, so they like to be under the starry nighttime sky.
No different than me on a nice summer night here in Wisconsin.
Yeah. And interestingly, they maintain this preference even when we overstock. We provide fewer lying spaces in that housing environment. The cows will still go in there, showing that they really like that preference. They like to go inside the barn more when they're higher producing cows. They're making more milk, perhaps to stay closer to that total mixed ration where there's more goodies in there. If it's raining outside, guess where they're going to be?
Inside?
They're going to be inside, yeah.
But don't cows need to graze, Dr. Cook?
Yeah, that's another question that is asked pretty frequently, and honestly, we haven't really done a very good job of trying to address that question of whether they actually create some pleasure, some need from consuming grass. But it's a relevant question, and there's one paper that we can kind of look at where they tried to answer that using a weighted gate. So they add weight to the gate and they allow cows to push against that gate and work to access either a TMR, a total mixed ration, or a pasture area. And it turns out in this study that the cows kind of like to access pasture. So they will work and push against that gate to get to pasture just as much as they would to fresh feed.
Okay, so I kind of feel like you're saying there are some benefits to pasture access.
This would suggest whether it's the pleasure of eating grass or whether it's just they kind of like to be outside for a time during the day, and they certainly work harder again in the evening because they show that strong preference for being outside at night. But if you can manage that, if you can build that into your production system, there are some potential benefits of doing that.
Okay. So
which are predominantly lameness related. Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. So when you do it well, again, when you manage that outdoor area, that it's not a big muddy lot all rained out. It's a comfortable dry area with grass. Giving those cows access to that area does reduce lameness.
Are there certain groups that benefit from pasture access more than others?
Yeah, that last study I shared was done on later lactation cows at lower milk production, and that's probably the group that we would potentially work with farmers to say, hey, should we let some of the cows out some of the time? Later lactation cows, a lot of our farmers already let their dry cows out at pasture just to give them a break from that housing environment when it's appropriate to do so.
Okay. Well, I can imagine that cows out on pasture acts a little bit differently than cows that are housed in a free stall. No different than you and me sitting here in an office most of the time.
Yep.
And a farmer that's out walking around all the time.
Yep. Biggest difference that when the cow is standing at pasture, she's standing on a nice soft pasture bed, a dirt bed. She's not standing on hard concrete, and that seems to be the risk factor for lameness. So the time budget is split up into different time spent milking, time spent feeding, time spent lying down. Generally, we see cows lying down less at pasture than we do in housing environments, of the order around 10 hours a day, because a grazing cow has to spend a lot of time eating, Courtney. About 8 hours a day of munching grass. Makes my jaw ache just thinking about it. 8 hours of munching grass, can you imagine?
No.
No. And that's not what they do when we house them and feed them a TMR. Actually, their time budget changes. Their time budget shifts because when we chop all the food up and put that TMR at the bunk, they can eat that more efficiently. And so they save about 3.5 hours in eating time because it only takes about 4.5 hours to consume that daily ration.
So here she is. She just gained 3.5 hours of her day. Where does that extra time go?
That 3.5 hours, we're asking for a big chunk of that to be applied to rest, because a grazing cow will do quite well at 10 hours of rest per day. But a housed cow that's, again, when she's standing on concrete, we need to get her off that concrete and lying in the stall. And so we're shooting for about 12 hours of rest per day for those housed cows. And that's indeed what they do when we design that housing correctly.
Yeah, and how do you get them to lie down for 12 hours a day?
You work on recommendations for improved housing, Courtney.
And I'm guessing that's what you've been doing for the last
that's kind of what we're up to, yeah. Oh. So we have recommendations that we've put on our website and we've introduced in our workshops and other outreach efforts. We've created standards from the cow up. You know, we've gone from an industry that built the barn to make sure the roof doesn't fall down, basically when it snows, to a situation where we're going to make sure we follow good engineering principles, but we're going to ask the cow what she needs and build around the cow and those needs to make sure that she remains happy and healthy and productive in that barn.
Okay.
So we've got standards for freestall dimensions and sizes, where bigger cows need bigger places to lie down, smaller cows have smaller places. And
I have a feeling that this is going to be a future episode on our podcast.
Possibly. Yeah, we might get into this in a little bit more detail.
A little bit of a nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm. But we got good data from other researchers showing that when you build around these principles, cows lie down more and they have less lameness.
So how have you seen this in practice over the years?
Well, I'm a veterinarian, so I'm used to treating sick cows, and we have patients. But I've been interested in fixing cow barns, and so to me, the cow barn has become the patient. And when we've applied our recommendations and worked with our dairy farmers to put those into place, as we did in this situation, this barn actually houses the same number of cows as this one that we added after about 5 to 10 years into this farm's life. And that became our cure because we see a dramatic reduction in health problems, and from the farmer's perspective, an increase in productivity, so an increase in milk production per cow, which makes the farm more profitable and more sustainable, Courtney.
Oh, my goodness. Way to tie in the first episode, Dr. Cook.
Wow.
I don't know how you do it.
I just want to leave the strong message that cows are incredibly versatile. We create expectations because historically cattle have grazed, but a modern high-producing dairy cow is a very versatile animal, and if we can create the correct housing environments, they can do amazingly well in that situation as well.
Well, you've convinced me of the need to house cows inside, and has briefly shown me that there are ways that we can do that. Obviously, there are situations where pasture access is appropriate, and might also just be how herds are grazed. in different countries, but here in the upper Midwest, given our beautiful warm summers and freezing cold temperatures in the winter, it might be worthwhile to look at housing cows inside. So I'm looking forward to some of our upcoming podcasts where we're going to dive deeper into some of those facility aspects.
Looking forward to it.
The Dairyland Initiative is supported by industry leaders who are advancing cow comfort worldwide. We would like to say a special thank you to our premier sponsor, Saputo, who is providing the global community with high-quality dairy products made from high-quality milk from healthy and well-cared-for animals. We'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsors, SaveCows.com, Zinpro, GPS Dairy Consulting, 40 Barn, Sure Gain Trow Nutrition, Munters, J&D Manufacturing, VES Artex, Ventec, and Kestrel Instruments. Thanks for tuning in to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Want more Dairyland Initiative? Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on our socials, and visit our website for all of the latest recommendations in dairy cattle housing and management. See you next time.